In the vast theater of global diplomacy, power is rarely shouted, it is whispered. Behind the closed doors of history, there are moments, unseen, unspoken, that shift the balance of nations. This is one of those moments. He once the most powerful man in the Western world. And yet, in a time of growing East tension, even Donald J. Trump knew there was one voice he needed to be heard by. A diplomat with steel in his spine and truth in his words. That man was Jaishankar. What was said, what wasn't said, and why now? This is the message the world wasn't supposed to hear. A signal cloaked in silence. A conversation that might just reshape the future of two great nations. Strategic silence carries louder meaning than public statements. Jaishankar's global respect has reshaped traditional power dynamics. Trump's message hints at a new USA-India diplomatic chapter. Unspoken alliances often define real geopolitical movements. This moment signals a shift from Western dominance to multipolar balance. In the realm of international diplomacy, words often mask intentions, but silence, true deliberate silence, can speak volumes. When powerful figures choose not to make a grand statement, when they refrain from the usual spectacle of press releases and televised addresses, it isn't because they lack something to say. It's because what they're conveying is too significant, too strategic to be diluted by noise. In global affairs, silence is not the absence of communication. It is a calculated form of messaging. It's a signal to those who understand the language of power. Timing and restraint. When Donald Trump, a man known for his brash rhetoric and unapologetic directness, chooses to deliver a message quietly, perhaps even privately, to a figure like Jaishankar, it's not an oversight. It's an orchestration. It means the words carried more weight than politics allowed to be spoken aloud. It means what was said was not for the media, not for public drama, but for influence behind the curtains of diplomacy. In that moment, the silence surrounding the message becomes more impactful than any public tweet or campaign speech ever could. Strategic silence creates room for reflection. It allows a message to breathe, to be interpreted, and more importantly, to be felt. It forces the recipient to lean in, to listen carefully, to understand the beyond the spoken sentence. In Jaishankar's case, a man revered for his calm authority and sharp intellect. The weight of such a message would not be lost. Trump's silence wasn't empty. It was full of context, intent, and consequence. In the halls of global strategy, what's not said is often more powerful than what is. It hints at hidden agreements, soft diplomacy, or even warnings. Strategic silence is used when the message is meant to linger, to echo in decision-making rooms, to be remembered without the stain of media distortion. This form of communication demands trust, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of stakes far greater than headlines. When silence is used well, it becomes a weapon more precise than words. A whisper that moves nations while the world hears nothing at all. Jaishankar has quietly emerged as one of the most influential diplomatic voices in the modern world. Not through theatrics or emotional rhetoric, but through measured strength and intellectual precision. His approach to foreign policy doesn't just represent India. It redefines how the world sees India. For decades, diplomacy was dominated by Western powers who dictated terms, framed narratives, and controlled the global conversation. But Jaishankar has disrupted that rhythm, not by shouting louder, but by speaking smarter. Every time he steps onto a global stage, there is a calm confidence in his words that commands attention. Whether he is addressing the UN, responding to provocative questions from Western media, or navigating tense geopolitical moments, he never reacts emotionally. Instead, he dissects narratives, corrects biases, and repositions India not as a follower of global orders, but as a sovereign force with its own voice and vision. His refusal to echo Western narratives has set a new precedent for how developing nations can assert themselves without apology or submission. This growing respect isn't confined to Indian audiences. Across international forums, foreign diplomats, scholars, and leaders recognize that Jaishankar is not just another foreign minister. He is a strategist. His ability to challenge powerful countries while maintaining dialogue shows a level of finesse that few global leaders possess today. In a world where diplomacy often folds under pressure or bends for favor, Jaishankar stands unyielding, redefining what it means to represent national interest with integrity and intelligence. As the world shifts toward a multipolar reality, where the old hierarchies no longer hold the same weight, Jaishankar's leadership is symbolic of that transformation. He doesn't just play the diplomatic game. He rewrites the rules of engagement. And that quiet revolution is being noticed. Countries that once spoke to India are now speaking with India, and often seeking its perspective before drawing conclusions. This respect wasn't demanded. It was earned. Jaishankar has become more than a diplomat. He is now a global standard for dignified resistance and strategic clarity. His rise marks the end of one-side diplomacy and the rise of a balanced conversation between East and West. The world is no longer watching India with curiosity, they're watching with respect. And that shift, led in part by Jaishankar, is both historic and irreversible. Donald Trump's message to Jaishankar was more than a passing comment or casual diplomatic gesture. It was a signal of a deeper shift taking place in the global power structure. While Trump's presidency was known for its unfiltered style and controversial statements, his decision to reach out, directly or indirectly, to India's most respected diplomat points to a recognition that the future of U.S. foreign policy may no longer be centered solely around traditional allies. The world has changed, and with it, so have the alliances that shape it. Jaishankar is not just a foreign minister. He represents a nation on the rise, confident, self-reliant, and unapologetically sovereign. Trump, no stranger to identifying power where it's growing, likely recognized that engaging with India now means engaging with the minds that shape its strategy. And Jaishankar is exactly that mind. His presence in every global conversation, his refusal to bend to pressure, and his clarity in articulating India's interests have made him the go-to figure for real dialogue. A message from Trump to him isn't just political. It's symbolic. It signals that Washington, regardless of administration, can no longer afford to treat India as an afterthought. The world's largest democracy is no longer content playing a secondary role. Trump's outreach suggests an acknowledgement that future global order will require strong USA-India cooperation, not as a dependency, but as a partnership of equals. This is a message that wasn't just meant for India. It was meant for the world to notice, and for power centers everywhere to recalibrate their strategies. The very idea that a former U.S. president would prioritize communication with a diplomat instead of a head of state tells you everything about Jaishankar's rising stature. It's not just about the message. It's about who receives it. And in this case, it points to a growing realization that diplomacy isn't just about titles. It's about influence, precision, and the ability to shape outcomes. Jaishankar represents all three. This exchange, however quiet or veiled, marks the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where the U.S. and India may find themselves not simply aligned by convenience, but bound by mutual understanding, strategic need, and a share to reshape global norms. And that story is only just beginning. In international relations, some of the most powerful decisions are made not through official declarations or signed treaties, but through quiet understandings, unspoken alliances that operate beneath the surface. These are the alignments that don't make headlines, but shape the course of history. They're built on shared interests, mutual respect, and long-term strategy rather than media soundbites or public diplomacy. The truth is, the real movements of global power are subtle and often intentionally hidden. They exist in the gray areas of international politics, where handshakes are less important than signals, and intentions are more powerful than speeches. Unspoken alliances are forged when nations recognize each other's strength without needing to announce it. They begin when one leader understands that another can offer more than influence. They can offer alignment of vision. In this context, Donald Trump's message to Jaishankar could be seen not just as a diplomatic interaction, but as the beginning or continuation of a silent agreement between two strategic minds. It's a way of saying, we see the world changing, and we know we may need to change with it together. When such connections form, they often bypass traditional channels. They're too important to risk being distorted by public opinion or political opposition. Instead, they move through discreet meetings, coded language, indirect communication, each gesture carrying weight beyond its surface. A comment made off camera, a phrase used in a speech, even a moment of pause. These become the tools of silent diplomacy, and they are far more effective than many realize. Jaishankar, with his measured responses and quiet confidence, is the perfect counterpart to such subtle alliances. He doesn't oversell India's position. He allows it to be understood. He speaks clearly, but leaves space for interpretation. Space that world leaders, like Trump, often recognize and respond to. These unspoken alignments are not without purpose. They serve as preparation for what's coming next: shifts in global power, changes in economic leadership, and recalibrated partnerships that better reflect today's realities. In a world that thrives on spectacle, Unspoken alliances are a reminder that real diplomacy isn't always visible. It happens in the shadows, it moves behind the scenes, and when it reveals itself. Often years later, it's already too late to ignore. The message is already sent. The world has already changed. If the balance of global power is undergoing a quiet but undeniable transformation. For decades, the world operated under a Western-dominated framework. One where decisions were largely shaped by a handful of nations, and the rest were expected to fall in line. But that era is fading. A new multipolar world is emerging where influence is no longer monopolized, and where regional powers like India are no longer just participants in the conversation. They are helping define the terms. The subtle moment when a figure like Donald Trump directs a message towards someone like S. Jaishankar reflects that shift in motion. This is not just about two individuals. It's about what they represent. Trump, with all his unpredictability, has always been able to sense where power is moving. Jaishankar, with his disciplined and strategic demeanor, embodies the rise of a nation that is no longer willing to be spoken for. The message between them, however quiet, however symbolic, is part of a larger truth. The days of a single superpower steering the world are over. Multipolarity is not chaos, it is balance. It is the redistribution of voice, responsibility, and vision across different regions of the world. Countries like India, Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa are no longer looking to the West for permission. They are building their own narratives, creating their own alliances, and defending their own interests. Jaishankar has been one of the most vocal and effective articulators of this change. He doesn't challenge the West with hostility, but with clarity. And in doing so, he has made it impossible for world powers to ignore India's presence at the global table. Trump's decision to engage, directly or indirectly, with Jaishankar signifies an understanding that diplomacy must now be based on mutual respect rather than old world hierarchy. It's a recognition that India is no longer a passive partner, but a pivotal player. That recognition itself is evidence of a world transitioning into a more balanced, more competitive, and ultimately more honest geopolitical reality. This shift doesn't mean the West is irrelevant. It means must adapt. Because the future will not be led by one voice, but by many. And among those voices, India, through leaders like Jaishankar, is becoming louder, not with noise, but with authority. That is the power of the multipolar moment, and it has already begun. And so, as the world tilts toward a new era, one no longer dictated by the loudest voice, but by the most deliberate, we stand witness to a quiet revolution in global diplomacy. A message once whispered between two unlikely figures now echoes far beyond closed doors. Donald Trump's subtle outreach to S. Jaishankar wasn't just a private gesture. It was a symbol of shifting power, of evolving alliances, and of a new kind of respect that isn't requested, but earned. Jaishankar didn't rise through volume, he rose through vision. And in this moment, the convergence of American instinct and Indian strategy reveals something profounding, that the future of global leadership lies not in dominance, but in dialogue. Not in orders, but in understanding. the silence between words, the meaning behind the message, and the strength of those who listen more than they speak. This is where true power now resides. What happens next may not be televised. It may not trend, but it will shape the course of nations. Because the world isn't watching one superpower anymore. The world is listening to many, and India, through calm conviction and unwavering purpose, is no longer waiting to be invited. It's already at the center of the conversation. This is the new world taking form, one message at one alliance at a time, one quiet revolution at a time.